Welcome back to Arts Weekly. Joining me is Victoria Adams-Zischke, Assistant Professor of Acting at the IPFW Department of Theater. Tori received her BFA in Acting from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, and her MFA in Acting from the Professional Theater Training Program at the University of Delaware. Tori, welcome to the show and welcome to IPFW.
Thank you very much.
So what do you teach over here in the theater department?
Well, right now I'm teaching Acting 1, which is the first major level acting class. Last semester, last semester I taught the fundamentals of performance for, the general population of students.
The non-majors.
To get a chance to see what performing is all about. And I've been teaching theater appreciation, which is sort of a theater history light for, general education course. But then I'm also doing the Shakespeare tour this semester with Brush Up Your Shakespeare.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But you have quite quite extensive professional experience prior to coming to IPFW. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you came here, and a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, I came from New York City, and I lived there for 15 years. I worked in the regional theater circuit, did some television, commercials, soap operas, things like that. I did Shakespeare, musicals, and pretty much everything in between.
Right, and when you say the regional theater circuit, really there's professional theaters in various different cities around the country, and you kind of had worked around at different ones.
Yeah, practically every major city in the United States.
That's a lot of traveling.
Yes. We always used to say that the United States was our living room because we were always going somewhere.
Right.
But most professional actors live in New York City. That's where they audition. And then they travel out to the different theaters that hire them. And then there's summer stock and Shakespeare festivals in the summertime and lots of different things. Yes, it does.
Well, it's great having you here at IPFW. How did you get your start in acting?
I was 3. I was the youngest of 3 children. My oldest sister wanted to be in the theater, which made my middle sister want to be in the theater, which meant the third one had to go along anyway, because the third one always went where the other 2 went. So that was me, and amazingly enough, I'm the only person still doing it.
I think we have photo documentation of what you actually look like as a child.
You do.
Sometime coming up on the screen. But did your parents encourage you to do that?
Well, my mother was a theater teacher. She taught, she was a professional actress for a brief amount of time and found it didn't really suit her life and her personality. And she moved to Florida and she taught at the high school level, and then she went off and got her PhD and teaches a lot of general studies theater.
Oh, wonderful. And what was your first stage experience? What was the first play that you did?
Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates. And
that's a well-known one.
It was a children's theater production, and my sister played the lead, not Hans Brinker, but the girl, and I played her cat, and followed by a series of other animal roles.
Wow. So you started as an animal and worked your way up to Shakespeare.
I felt like I really had gotten somewhere when I finally got to play a human being, yes.
But not all actors start young, do they? I mean, there's the famous story how Harrison Ford was a carpenter until he was in his mid-20s before he was cast in Star Wars or whatever his first movie was.
Right.
Is that a little bit different than, let's say, some of the other art forms where you can start a little bit later? You don't necessarily have to start young?
You can start whenever the inspiration hits you. A lot of people start as children doing community theater and children's theater, and it's a wonderful opportunity for children to get up in front of people and explore the arts and have fun and make lasting friendships and bonds with people.
And learn how to express themselves.
Express themselves and not be afraid to get up in front of a group of people, which a lot of people have to do throughout their life, giving presentations or teaching or, even in a boardroom doing a meeting with your fellow employees. So it's a good skill to have. And film is, a lot of kids start in film, but then they don't transition to adulthood in it. A lot of kids do commercials. But
getting back to your professional career in different regional theaters around the country, you did a lot of Shakespeare. And certainly I think that was primarily one of the main aspects of your training, is it not? Shakespeare itself? Yeah,
at graduate school, certainly. I went to a program that emphasizes classical acting, and I found myself at Oregon Shakespeare Festival right out of my undergraduate degree. I literally got hired a week before graduation on the spur of the moment and picked up my life overnight and moved to Ashland, Oregon, not knowing where I was going or what I was doing. And I ended up being there for 2.5 years before I left for graduate school. And I found myself there, and I didn't know anything about Shakespeare.
Right,
and here I was at the Shakespeare Festival.
And you didn't know anything about Shakespeare?
Well, I hadn't really studied it. I'd had a class in undergrad, and so I'd had a little bit, but I didn't really know a lot about the technical side of it, and I didn't have a lot of training in it.
But you decided to get training after acting in Shakespeare. You went to the University of Delaware, which is known for classical training.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about what classical actor, to our audience, they might think that acting is acting, but really, and it is.
Yes.
But there's different ways of training actors, and you have a very particular form of training that I think is interesting.
Well, classical acting does require more than your just run-of-the-mill acting. If you're performing in a Shakespeare festival, for instance, out in Utah or out in Oregon, you're outside. You're dealing with the elements. You're usually in a theater that seats 800 to 1,200 people, so you're having to project in a different way. Shakespeare requires a little bit more understanding, certainly about his text and how to get the audience, draw them in and help them understand what's going on. Because in our country, it's not an innate skill right now to understand Shakespeare. We don't really learn a tremendous amount about it. In England, it's a little bit different. So you need different skills in classical acting that you need in general theater.
It always appeared to me in my dealings with actors and seeing students study acting as well as actors act on stage, that they must be incredibly good readers because they have to really know what those lines mean. And for those of us who just read casually, and we'll go over, I had a poetry teacher, like a lot of people. I remember I went up to him one time, I said, I'm having a hard time understanding what this poem means. He goes, just memorize it and say it. And it was kind of good advice, because if you have to say something and make it your own, which is exactly what an actor has to do, you really dig deeply into that meaning. And so I always thought theater was a good way of teaching people to read well.
Yes, it is. And you have to be able to cold read really well, especially in auditions.
What's cold read?
Cold read is, for instance, even with Shakespeare, you'll do an audition in New York, and a lot of times you'll get the sides or the scene ahead of time so you can prepare at home. But then they might throw something completely different at you and say, no, I want you to read this scene. And you got to kind of go out in the hallway and come back in a very short period of time, ready to go with this new material. Commercials is all about cold reading. So it's literally you have 2, 3, 4 minutes with this material, and then you have to get up there and do it.
That sounds like incredibly scary. But
it is and it isn't. It's something you get used to. When you first start doing it, yes, it's terrifying and you make a lot of mistakes, but it's a skill like any other skill.
What do you like about Shakespeare?
Well, nobody wrote plays the way this man wrote plays, and whether you believe he wrote them or somebody else wrote them, I don't want to get into that argument, but it's unbelievable language, and it's an unbelievable insight into the human condition. I mean, he wrote these plays a long, long, long time ago, and yet they're very relevant. When you take Romeo and Juliet and what Baz Luhrmann did with, the film that he made.
The film version with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, and you make it about gangs, rival gangs. I mean, it's very relevant information, and it's something he was able to tap into, something that is so still relevant.
Yes.
Centuries later.
When I read Shakespeare, it's almost hard to believe it was written by the same person. The language is consistent, the style, but the knowledge of human nature is so vast. He has written virtually every kind of emotion, and he's just a beyond genius. It seems like to me, and but I think again it's one of those things where people don't need to be scared of it. Once you hear it, you learn how to hear it more. It takes practice to listen to.
It's my dad always says, "Are you going to be doing a musical soon? Because that Shakespeare's okay, but I like those musicals."
Don't we all? I know.
And so I just tell my dad, just sit there and allow the play to wash over you. He loves opera, and he doesn't have the problem with opera. He sits there and he allows the play the opera to affect him. And I say, do the same thing with Shakespeare. Don't go in there saying I'm not going to understand, and because then you've missed the first 3 scenes.
Exactly.
Talking yourself into that you're not going to understand it.
And good actors can really bring the understanding to you, and that's what's really what I appreciate about really well-trained actors like yourself. But what kind of things are we doing here at IPFW to bring Shakespeare to the schools so that a new generation can get turned on to it?
Well, what I'm working on right now is putting together the tour for Brush Up Your Shakespeare. It's a delightful 50-minute production that was put together, I believe, in Alabama. And it's funny, it's witty, it's charming, and then it has elements of Shakespeare inserted into it.
And these actually go out into the high schools?
Yes, they do. We tour all around the greater Fort Wayne area within about an hour's drive from IPFW. That's what we can accommodate right now.
And how do people find out if you're a high school principal or a teacher, you want to tell your kids a little?
Well, you call me.
You call
481-6941. That's what you call my office, and leave me a message, and I'll call you back.
Right, and it's a completely free thing that we do here at IPFW for the high schools.
It doesn't cost a thing, and it's Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Performances times are usually in the 9 to 10 a.m. range in order to accommodate when our students need to be back.
Well, that's a great opportunity. Really, we only have a few more seconds, but I want to ask you, what's your favorite role of all time that you play?
That's kind of hard, but my husband would kill me if I didn't say it was When We Met.
You bet.
Playing Arthur and Guinevere in Camelot, I think.
Perfect.
And it certainly altered my life completely. I married him only 8 weeks after we finished the production, and then we have a delightful 6-year-old. So
that's great, Tori. Yeah. It's wonderful having you at IPFW.
Thank you.
And we just look forward to seeing you on stage and seeing you work with our students. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
For information or tickets to the IPFW Department of Theater's upcoming events, you can visit the college's website at ipfw.edu/VPA or call the Schatz Line box office at 481-6555. Arts Weekly can be seen Tuesdays through Thursday on College Access Television, as well as Twitter and Facebook. I'm Chuck O'Connor. Thanks for tuning in to Arts Weekly. Join me next week with guests Paul Hoverman from the Niswonger Performing Arts Center and Jim Sparrow, Executive Director of Arts United.